Hey everybody, sorry I wasn't able to post a video last week. I was sick, so no videos were posted over Easter weekend. I apologize. So as a result, uh, we are going to be doing two week of videos. This is going to be week 16, which is the week I would have done last weekend. And then tomorrow I will do week 17, which is this current week. So for week 16, which was days 103 through 109. We kicked it off with Harbinger number 35, signed by Sean Chen. Um, I was a big fan of the Valiant titles when Jim Shooter was in charge. And even then, this title was towards the end, I guess you'd say, of the Jim Shooter era. Soon after this, um, uh, Valiant was having money problems. They're kind of like losing direction. And this was like, you could tell like this was the last of the stories and arcs that they were doing under Jim Shooter's uh, tutelage. So, but this is an issue where um, uh, it was right after their latest event, which was like, I forget what the name of it was, but basically, uh, Earth lost all electrical power, and all the characters had to fight it. And actually, it wasn't just electrical power; it was mystical issues, also because of the main bad guys being mystical. And I think it was the Dark guy. He was in charge. He was the result of it. This was the aftermath, which resulted in Magnus, robot fighter, being stuck in the past, and this was an issue where he interacts with the Harbingers, specifically with Faith. Faith has always been, you can see her in the cover, she had always been a heavy-set character, and it's one of those where it's like, she was the only one that was like, oh, I have superpowers. I am a superhero, and I gotta have a cape, and I have she bought in, and she was like, it was one of those where it's like, it made her special. But they stuck to it. They didn't deviate from who Faith was. So, and so this was an issue that I got signed by Sean Chen. And of all the Harbinger issues that he did, this is the one I decided to share with you guys. So, one thing I'm doing right now is, because I'm like still slightly under the weather, you can tell from my voice, I don't really want to focus on doing all in here. I just want to be focused on talking and get myself into a groove and a rhythm because it's been like 2 weeks since I really did some work. So I'm just going to work on these bricks, which I want to do the bricks also to help pop these guys. Then it'll help with like, well, I don't where the separation between the brick wall and these guys. So I'm just going to work on that for you guys today while I'm talking about the books that have been signed. So we follow day 103 with day 104. Day 104 was Heartland, and this one takes place over in Ireland. It was an Ireland that Garth Ennis did. Him being Irish had a sentimental reason for him. And when I had him sign it, I told him how my family had immigrated from the United States, and when they arrived in the United States, they immediately enlisted in the Continental Army to fight for our freedoms. And so he was like, "Oh, really? And where'd you come from?" And I said, "I think it was like North, North Dublin or North. I can't remember. I couldn't remember the name of it actually. If I were to look on a map, I could point it out right off the bat. So, but I've got the documentation. My uncle did he did the research to find out where we came from over in Ireland. So, thank you to my uncle for doing the research. So, but it was nice interacting with him, and so instead of having him sign like a Preacher comic, I had him sign this one because it has much more sentimental to me than his Preacher stuff. So, And I think it was like, and I think remember when I had him sign, he's like, oh, I don't sign too many of these. So he was touched that of all the books I could have him sign. This was the one I had him sign. So, okay, we gotta go in here. We gotta do some like almost like outline stippling here. Make this gun barrel pop. So, and then of course also you take a look up here. I intentionally do that so that way the bricks form a texture. So and actually all I'll do is I'll just like look away while I'm stippling, so that way you get so it's not even and it's got that organic feel of not being smooth as cinder bricks are. So, so after that, we go back into DC for the eyes. We start the eyes, and we have Identity Crisis issue number 2, signed by Rags Morales. This specific issue, I actually had Rags sign it the prior weekend when it was up at the Lehigh Valley Con. Had him sign this one. The reason why I wanted him to sign this one is because even though Identity Crisis was about crisis where one of the with a elongated man's wife died, and the crisis of them having to uh, deal with one of their own, even though she was just Ralph's wife, uh, one of their own being killed, but then also finding out, he found out why Dr. Light was the way he was, because uh, Zatanna had used her magic abilities to make him forget what he'd done, and as a result, it's one of the reasons why he was. It's really the reason why he was kind of like a lame character, and why it's like how he could get beaten by the Titans was because of this. Was so many times in the past was because of this. So it was a fun. It was a fun like how they kind of like uh, made Doctor Light like a psychotic, uh, deviant individual, but also it's like I kind of had him grow up from like being a stooge villain for the Titans to beat up on. So in many ways, it was basically it's like growing up the DC characters. But the reason why I specifically had this one signed was because it essentially was, even though it's Identity Crisis, it could have just as easily have been an a story arc for the Justice League of America with the classic Justice League characters. It had like the main characters were like Elongated Man, Hawkman, Green Arrow, Black Canary. The only characters really missing from this story arc was they didn't have like Red Tornado or Firestorm, and that was like almost like the core of the team during like leading up to how when they say the golden era of the Justice League, those guys were the main team really. Uh, Superman, Wonder Woman, the big heavy hitters, they'd appear every once in a while, but they weren't your staple characters. These characters in Identity Crisis that were spotlighted, those were the main characters of the Justice League, and that's the era I liked the most. So of course I had this one signed. And you'll see when we get into the Justice League or the Jays, you'll see why I have the specific issues that I have signed is because of that. Um, so then after Identity Crisis, issue number 2, signed by Rags, we go into day 106, Infinite Crisis. I forget what issue it is, and it was signed by Wayne Fosher. Remember, because the deadline was so tight and the artists that they were using were so detailed, such as Phil Jimenez and Ivan Reyes and George Perez, and even then Jerry Ordway being very high detailed, hyper detailed artists. Many of these issues had to be inked by multiple artists, and Wayne was brought in to help out with this issue. And this, in my opinion, is the best sequel to Crisis on Infinite Earths. Crisis on Infinite Earths is one of my favorite stories, miniseries, and this one was just kind of like bring it off full circle. Because remember, at the conclusion of Crisis on Infinite Earths, there is one Earth. With Infinite Crisis, they brought back the multiverse with this story arc. And most importantly was they didn't, even though it was a crisis event, they didn't have to like reboot the titles and reboot and retcon the origins of the heroes. They just had the heroes deal with the crisis as it was, which is what I like the most about it. Was until then, up until New 52, they never rebooted. Ever since New 52, they've constantly had to reboot the DC line because it sucked and they've lost continuity. And as a result of losing continuity with the characters, um, it's their titles have fallen apart. So, but no, so that's the reason why I had this one signed because, like I said, it was for me. It was a sequel to Crisis on Infinite Earths. I apologize. I'm going to. Yeah, I had a bad cough, so if I cough throughout this, and you gotta keep in mind this is the most I've talked in probably 2 weeks. So, other than last night in John's long box when I was on with him, and even then, there's a lot of times where I'd have to mute my mic because I was coughing. So, but after that, we go to Infinity Inc. number 10, signed by Jerry Ordway, and this was day 107. Remember, Jerry introduced Infinity Incorporated in the All Star Squadron, and then he went on to launch the Infinite Incorporated comic book, which was basically it was all the offspring of the Justice Society and them. And the very first story that they had was essentially a continuation of the story that they were, or the villain that they were dealing with, being the Ultra Humanite when they debuted in All Star Squadron. Remember that was a big arc where they had the All Star Squadron fighting against the Ultra Humanite. So, what was the first villain that that Infinity Incorporated have to fight? Ultra Humanite. Instead of this one, where it's an actress who is the brain of Ultra Humanite, it's the albino monkey or ape. So, and of course, this is the issue where they did a takeoff on the classic uh, DC title with all of the villains with knives, uh, uh, dividing up the earth under their own territories. They did the same thing, only had the Justice Society members under the Ultra Humanites' influence doing the same thing. So it was a neat. At the time, as a kid, I didn't know. It wasn't until later that I discovered that it was a homage to the classic, uh, like 1940s cover. So, but yeah, so that's the reason why I wanted this one to be shared. I think this is like one of the very first issues of Infinity Incorporated I ever actually had Jerry Ordway sign. So really important. I enjoyed it a lot and significant to me. And then we follow that up with Day 108, the Invasion miniseries, and it is issue number 2, signed by Keith Giffen and signed who did the writing chores, and then also signed by Bart Sears. Bart Sears, he was following up on uh, Todd McFarlane did the first issue. He did the follow up with issue number 2. And as a kid, it was like, wow, his style is really similar to Todd McFarlane. So this is really cool. And I thought he did a good job of following up with Todd. And so having this one signed, and of course this was a cool one because basically all the aliens from the DC universe have decided that they're going to invade and take over Earth because of the fact that Earth's superheroes have been meddling in galactic affairs for too long. And so, and it was a good, it resulted in the end of it being, at the end of this issue, one of the Dominators releases a bomb which activates the meta gene in all of the in like on Earth. So a bunch of people who normally didn't have superpowers, all of a sudden it's basically their response to, well, we can't have mutants. What do we have? We have what, metahumans, and that's how we explain it now. So we've got our own, and that's where the very end of this issue, the uh, the bomb is going off, and it then messes up with some of this, like Animal Man. It messes up with his superpowers. So, but in the end of this issue is when DC then launches the Legion title. They then also launched or expanded with the Justice League Europe title. So instead of having one Justice League team, you have two. One in the United States called Justice League International, and then the second team being Justice League International / Europe. So, and Bart Sears did the artwork for that, which was, I mean, as a kid, I'm like, oh, this is great. He's just such cool artwork, and he's doing a Justice League, which was my favorite title or favorite team. So I really enjoyed it. So it was great having them both sign this issue. And then we follow that up with Day 109. Here's the thing: is that I didn't have a whole lot of eyes, which worked in my favor because I'll use those empty slots of not having any eye titles to then have Justice League, more Justice League books to be shared. Now, I could have shared like Invasions 1, signed by Keith Giffen, and issue number 3, signed by Bart Sears. But I just wanted to share that one issue so I'd have those spots for Justice League, which I'm really excited about. Again, I apologize, guys. So, but yeah, so I've got all the spots, and then the last book we're going to be sharing with you guys today. Hold on here. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so the last book for week 16 is Incredible Hulk Annual number 16, or number 18, I'm sorry. So it's Incredible Hulk Annual 18, signed by Kevin Maguire. And this was fun for me because up until then, Kevin Maguire mainly was doing DC books, specifically Justice League of America. So this is one of those rare times where I got to see him working with Marvel titles. So that made it a lot of fun. So I do enjoy. This was actually the first Marvel book I ever had him sign, other than or first book period for him to sign, other than a Justice League book. So had a lot. I'm very happy that I had him sign this one. So, and this one, even though it was part of like a 3-part series running through annuals, running through the Namor and Doctor Strange and Silver Surfer annuals, I think this is like the only one that I really got or I really paid attention to because it had Kevin Maguire's artwork. So I'm very glad I have this one signed and that I'm sharing it with you. So tomorrow we do week 17, and at the end of the week, we will be starting with sharing the J's, the Justice League books, and we're going to have about we're going to definitely have 2 full weeks of Justice League, maybe even 3. So, because it was just like I gotta get caught up because I know I've had empty spots. Specifically, even just the example being the the eyes. So we'll have fun with it, and I'm going to be sharing my favorite books. And I've got a lot. I have a lot of Justice Leagues that have been signed. It's one of those deals where it's like whenever I go to a show and an artist will be there, first thing I'll do is I'll look and see if they did any Justice Leagues. Perfect example is Mark Bagley is slotted to do the Jersey State Comic Con, and he did a run on Justice League. I'm specifically going to have him sign the issues Justice League crossover with Blackest Night, which is where uh, uh, Zatanna and Vixen, they have to fight the deceased members of the Justice League, being Vibe and Steel. So definitely going to have those signed. Because why? Because Vibe is my favorite character. So guys, I'm about done here. Plus my voice is really cracking, and I need to cough again. So you guys all have a great day. You know I'm having a great day, but when life is stressful and you got adversity like I am right now, you just take it all one dot at a time.